Hi, I'm Matthew Humphreys and this is Storyboards101, where I make short videos introducing artists to the foundational basics of storyboarding. My professional art career started in comic books, and the transition from storyboarding was more confusing than I would have thought. Since more and more comic book artists are making the transition to storyboards, I thought it would be valuable to show some lessons I learned when switching career paths. The concept I made this video from is provided by Eugene Commodore from a sample storyboard he was making. You can find his links in the description below. Comics to storyboards. At first glance, they seem very similar. Visual storytelling using ordered panels to convey a series of story beats to an audience. But there are some key differences we should pay attention to. So let's get started. The concept. A boy is hungry. He wants a snack. He goes to the kitchen and looks for one. He wants a cookie, but finds a carrot, and despair. Here, we have this concept laid out in a comics page. This page follows the basic reading layout many comic artists use, left to right, top to bottom. The content in the panels leads the viewer's eye to the next panel. The intro caption box sets up the story. We follow the caption down to the right across the house, down to the motorcycle. The motorcycle's path leads us back to the left, to the interior of the house where the boy kicks open a door. His dialogue balloon leads us up to the right where we see a close-up of his rumbling stomach. The lettering of the gurgle leads us down to the L-shaped panel, starting with a boy at the door. Then, the shape of the panel and the perspective of the room leads us left to the top of the fridge, where a cookie jar is. The extra detail on the cookie jar leads the eye down to the imagination cookies floating around the boy's head. His gaze then leads us right across the page to the bottom corner, telling us to flip the page. The next page starts with the prize. The cookie jar facing right, and the impact of the speed lines leads us right to the boy looking up at the cookie jar. The curve of the boy's posture leads us to the panel below where he's reaching up left to the cookie jar. We follow down and he's reaching into the cookie jar. Again, we follow right to his terrified expression, leading us left to find the boy in despair. He found a carrot instead of a cookie. The lettering and the pushed perspective of the hand holding the carrot would lead us to the next page, and so on and so forth. Great. That plays well and the reader can follow the story. In comics, we direct the reader's eye to go where we want it to. This is a very good skill that translates over to storyboarding, but comics have the benefit of reviewability. A reader can see the page as a whole and make connections in their brain of how we got from one panel to the next. A lot of this information is happening in the gutters between panels. If you're unfamiliar with this concept, Scott McCloud's book, Understanding Comics, is a great place to start. But if you're here, then you probably get this concept already. Using gutters allows us to shape a panel to create a specific space, ensuring the reader is looking at exactly what we want them to. A square panel lets us take in the character with action, but focus on a specific part of the room. A tighter rectangular panel forces us to look closer at the rumbling stomach. An L-shaped panel makes you create a sort of camera pan, making the reader start at one end and finish at another. But the reader can always see the whole picture. So if something doesn't work perfectly, the reader can still go back and follow along and see the context. But when telling a story on a screen, we only have one panel shape, the screen. This is our playground, and we have to tell the entire story using this viewport. Images flash by and are gone forever. Okay, that's a little extreme, but the idea is that most people don't rewind and play while watching something. It's up to us to tell the story in a fashion that goes from one panel to the next without making the audience guess. Because on screen, we don't have a gutter or a full page view. In essence, there's no reviewability. For animation storyboards, we're the first step in taking the script and putting it in front of the audience. If the film or episode is the building, we're the foundation it's built upon. It's also important to note that while the person at home is our end goal audience, we have to consider the animators of our studio our audience as well. There are plenty of other parts to this building, like the production team, the post-production team, checking and timing, designers. There's so many jobs to talk about, but we'll get into that in another video. For now, let's just focus on storyboards and animators. Animators have so much work to do and so little time to do it in. It's our responsibility to take as much of the guesswork out of their day as possible. While an animator certainly has the ability to take a single panel of a scene and make it work, they will be forced to spend a lot more time figuring out the scene. What's the acting? What's the path the character is taking? What's the mood we're trying to set? These things take time to figure out, and that time should be spent during our part of the process. So what used to be a single comic panel is now considered a scene. And within that scene, we need multiple panels to tell the story within the context of our single panel shape. This is what I call connective tissue. how did we get from this panel to the next panel? Essentially, how did we get from A to B? To start with, because the audience can't see the whole comic page of ideas, we need what's called establishing shots. These shots are used in comics as well, but they tend to be used a little bit less. For animation, it's almost always a good idea to establish your locations every time we're seeing a new one, especially without characters in them. So going from the house outside, we will then cut to the kitchen, without the characters, so the audience has a moment to breathe in the new scene because the action will start very soon. Most storyboards will require at least 2 to 3 panels a scene to get an idea across. The setup, the action, and the payoff. This can also be called the start pose, the action pose, and the settle pose. Terms will vary, but the idea remains the same. Different productions will have different requirements, but this is a good starting point for any board artist to aim for. We obviously don't have to show every step a character takes or show them completely across a room, but we have to at least imply the motions so the animators know where the action starts and stops before the scene cuts. How and when to cut is a lesson for a later video about shot language. So let's do a board with this concept and see the difference. I'll be doing the audio and sound effects vocally the way we would when pitching a board to the room. Note how with audio, we're able to draw the viewer in without the use of panel shapes or caption boxes. We start on the boy's house. So hungry! Snack time! Oh! Dun dun dun! Mm, mm. Gotcha! All right. Cookie, here I... Carrot? No! So you can see how we tell the same story, and while we lose some tools from comic-style storytelling, we gain new tools and the ability to show even more information to the viewer. I hope this has helped you start your transition from comic artist to storyboard artist. Storyboard artists wanting to break into comics? Watch this video in reverse. Stay tuned for my next video, The Process. Let's make a storyboard, which may end up being a stream. I'll find out if that's functional for me, and we'll see you then. Until next time.